For me, it's all about like the sustainability, slower growth, stronger communities. I have a lot of friends that have kind of phased out from 10 years ago. They just stopped posting because it is really tiring when you feel like you're creating just to feed the algorithm. It's the type of work you have to love to do because you have to be willing to post no matter if that video goes viral or not, or if you get paid for it. Let's say you get a couple million on TikTok. You're like, oh my God, I made it, right? Like I had friends who were like surpassing me very quickly, but they're like, how come I'm not getting brand deals? Like, why am I not seeing the returns? And like, why do I still have to work a regular job, right? If you have, I feel like that's what kind of keeps you going and makes you successful as a creator, that's able to like hang on for so long.
Just to give our listeners context, you slid in my DMs just for just to make it very clear. You slid in
on
my
a business
DMs
level. Okay.
business level. So she slid in my DM. It was like, yo, what's good? I'm gonna be in New York. Love to chop it up with y'all. So that's why we here. And we immediately felt like, oh, she's dope, and she's been doing this for a decade, which is, creator economy is a relatively new phenomenon, but you've obviously indexed into it very early on. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Remy. I'm I guess primarily vegan food creator, and I also do a little bit of like health and wellness, lifestyle content. And I've been doing this for, like you said, almost a decade. Started off doing purely just vegan recipes, and then it kind of morphed into a little bit more lifestyle stuff. I got into YouTube and blogging, and that sort of infused that personal element a little bit more. And then of course, like introduction of like stories and things. I feel like that personal element just like naturally became a part of it. And I've been doing it full time for I think almost 8 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Did you have a career before that, before you were doing it full time?
I did. I feel like it really happened by accident. So I was doing it for fun. I was in college at the time that I started my account. And it was actually because at the time I was working through an eating disorder, and I posted all the food that I was eating as sort of like an accountability log with the therapist I was working with. So that was my way of kind of staying on track, but also staying in school versus going to like outpatient treatment. And around the same time, I was vegan at the time, and I still am, but around the time I feel like veganism was fairly new as far as like social media goes and being like popular, aside from like very crunchy granola kind of people, So it was sort of like, I think, good timing and luck. And I always loved photography. So I think the combination of the two was just like fun to make it look nicer. And it just kind of like popped off a little bit on social media at the time, just photos only on Instagram. Like this was way back.
And where were you doing this?
I was doing it in my college dorm. So I was going to school at Barnard.
Oh, you were going to Barnard.
Yeah.
Got you.
And I was doing it like on my windowsill, getting like whatever light that I could. And it was the first time that I was cooking for myself also. I think before that, I never really had full control over what I was eating. So it was much easier for me to be like vegan, for example, and like really work on healing my relationship with food. And basically through that account, I started getting partnerships with brands to do like photography for them before I even had like 2,000 followers. So I think for me, the photography element is what stood out the most to other people and brands and stuff like that. And then I was studying psychology at the time. I had my first job at a consulting firm for about 3 months, and then I ended up leaving that job and then have been doing it full time ever since.
Why did you decide to leave your consulting job?
It was a combination of a couple things. Originally, it was because I wasn't doing well like mentally at that job. I think it wasn't something that was very fulfilling for me. The hours were pretty intense, and I felt like, maybe we'll talk about this later, but I kind of slipped back into old habits with like substances and stuff like that, just because it was all around me. I feel like it's very common on like Wall Street and consulting firms. And I found it a difficult environment to be around. So I was like, let me take a leave and just like, I'll sustain myself off of these like side partnerships that I'm doing and see how it goes. And around that same time, I got offered my biggest partnership at the time, which was my entire salary. So I was like, okay, I can leave for a year, see how it goes, work on myself, and then if I want to go back, I'll go back. If not, I'll definitely find a different job.
Like, how did that first deal come about?
So it was actually organic. Like the brand had reached out to me, and it was a multi-part activation, which is why the fee was so high. So it was a combination of obviously content to be posted on my feed, and then some in-person events. So we actually did an event at a WeWork in Brooklyn, and I was part of it. So I think just like the multi-shoot situation, the fact that I had to post, the in-person element, and obviously like usage and all that, that's why the contract was so big.
How much of that positioning was based on what you knew, and how much of it was just them proposing it and putting it in front of you?
So At the time, I had no manager. I had a second email that was a fake email. I was pretending to be a man to just like be the bad guy, you know?
What was your name?
Christopher. And it got so tricky. I was having a hard time keeping up that sometimes I'd send it from the wrong email, you know? So I was like, gotta stop. But my manager at work at the time, I told him about it because we were pretty friendly. And I was like, hey, you know, I do this thing on the side. What do you think? And he's like, I think you should ask for double the amount. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, I don't feel
What was
comfortable
the
doing
initial
that.
amount?
So the initial amount was around $30,000. And then he told me just ask for a double and see what happens. Or I think actually it must have been 40. And then I asked for 80 and it came out to like 68. So
Got you.
yeah. And I was like, I can't believe that actually worked. He obviously knew nothing about like the creator stuff. And I didn't really either. Cause before that I was doing shoots for like $2,000 maybe, just like branded imaging and stuff like that. So yeah, it was like mind blowing to me. Of course, I didn't realize that, you know, I was going to get paid like 120 days after the last day of the contract. But, you know, at the time I was like, this is giving me the confidence to at least take some time and like separate myself from this environment that I'm in and then figure out what I want to do.
Just for context, how big was your account? Like how long had you been like successfully doing it full time, I guess, right? Where you were consistently getting those sorts of things. Because I think that's a question that a lot of people are going to have.
Yeah, I think at that time, my account wasn't that big. It must have been, it was definitely way before 100,000 followers. So it might have been like 20,000.
And by the way, we're talking about Instagram?
Instagram,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, cool.
Instagram. At the
Okay.
time, I was only on Instagram and YouTube.
Okay.
And I think it was maybe the combination because on YouTube, I was very like camera facing, talking all the time. And I feel like that is what helped too, because it was basically a commercial shoot. So I think having the YouTube channel as almost like a showcase for my abilities was really helpful. But it was also a matcha related partnership. So I think that's been a part of like the brand identity from the beginning.
Okay.
And I think just like maybe setting myself up to be this very recognizable brand in terms of like the things that I really love and always post about was helpful. But I really didn't have that many followers at the time at all. But I also think back then having that amount of followers was a bigger deal. I don't know if you guys agree.
No, totally. I think one of the things we talk about all the time is that, and thank you for sharing how many followers you had, that actually doesn't matter, right? I mean, I think for certain partners that are just getting into the space, they want to look at a vanity metric and say, oh, this person has 2 million followers, 3 million followers. That's very important for them because they need to justify what the spend is. But I think for the most savvy of brands and the most savvy partners, they're actually looking at engagement. They're looking at how authentic is the person or the creator that they're talking to, working with.
Yeah.
The other thing that's super interesting now, and I don't know if you look at things now this way, but you know, whether it's 40,000, 80,000, 100,000, it's like what these brands have to pay the agencies is far greater, right? And if you really position yourself as like, okay, hey, you started in photography, right?
Right.
You actually have to pay a photographer who has a creative director, who has an editor, who has all these different things. So if you start to change the conversation around like, hey, you're not just reaching out to an influencer, you're actually reaching out to an agency that's doing all of these different things, right? And then if you look at it in that lens, then you're like, okay, well, for 80 grand, 68,000, whatever the number is, they actually got to steal, considering that they have all the creation, all the production, all of the creative and distribution, right? Right. And talent. Like they could have just hired you as talent only where they take care of all those other things. So
Yeah.
that's something that we think about a lot. And we try to tell people to think about a lot.
Yeah, that
and
makes a
also
lot of
the
sense.
agency would probably go after people with higher vanity metric because they have to justify to their client because they need to get that bigger budget. The bigger budget allows them to take a bigger vig. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they need to go after the guys with the high. But if you work directly, oftentimes directly with the brand, directly with people that are stakeholders in the brand, there's less incentive for them to look for somebody with a bigger vanity metric. They rather work with somebody that they could feel like they're gonna do the best for the brand. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that we also noticed.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if you guys feel this way too, but when I work with a brand, I take it very far. Like I feel like it's beyond just a business relationship, but like a more meaningful partnership. For example, if I work with a brand and I've never used the product before, I will go out of my way to make sure that I'm using it at least like a month beforehand if I have that opportunity and time, and to make sure it's something I love, but also that I share organically, because I feel like if it's not something I would share organically, there's no point in me doing a paid ad to promote it, you know?
Totally.
And then after the fact, am I still using it, or is it something I'm going to post about once and like never use again? I try to be mindful of that. Of course, like sometimes it's not possible because how many different products can you use on a daily basis? But I feel like it's meaningful in that way, and brands can tell when there's a brand partner that's willing to kind of do that a little bit more organically versus someone who's kind of going to like post and forget it, you know?
For sure. So then after doing it yourself through a alias, which we've done and other people who have come on have actually done too and still do actually.
Yeah.
When did you, I'm assuming now you have a manager.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
How far along into the journey, and has that been helpful?
It's definitely been helpful. I think it was around maybe when I had like 30, 40,000 on Instagram.
Okay.
And the reason why I ended up getting a manager was because I got my first international deal, and it was like this huge commercial that I had no idea how to manage. And I had no idea how to price. The first partnership that I told you guys about, the 68,000 one, I just threw a number out there, but I didn't really know how it broke down. So I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. Like there's flights involved, there's international travel involved. Like I really don't know. So I reached out to a friend of a friend who worked at an agency, and then basically told her, hey, like I have this very urgent contract. I don't know if you guys want the cut of this, but I really need help. So let me know. We got to work, and then that was kind of it. But I think maybe the holdup for a lot of people is the fear that you're gonna lose out on money. But I've seen that in almost every situation, they end up negotiating your rate higher and compensating for not only what they're taking, but like you still make more on top of that. So I think it's worth it. And the legal protection is so important because I've definitely signed away usage rights like crazy in the past. Luckily, you know, nothing's come back to bite me, but I had no idea what I was like signing.
Knock on wood, nothing comes back to bite you.
That's interesting. We separate legal with management.
Okay.
So your agency handles both?
Yeah. So they have like in-house legal. So I guess my managers are looking over the contracts for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it do they specialize in general talent like celebrity, or is it specific to digital and creators?
The first agency I was at was a lot of like bachelor showgirls, so
Okay.
kind of like reality TV stars, and then also like lifestyle beauty content creators. So kind of a combination, I guess, because a lot of them become content creators.
Yeah.
And then the most recent agency I was at was one that focuses on, I guess, celebrity talent, music, like there's different divisions, and they just started their digital. And then now I'm at one that's more focused on modeling, but they have a digital arm. So
Interesting.
yeah, I don't usually jump around, but I've had a lot of transitions recently, and I feel like it's a little bit like dating. Like you got to figure out, you know, the best fit for you. So
You just dated a bunch of different agencies.
That's
not exactly, but I'm figuring it out, you know?
Yeah. So in this current relationship, like, I mean, was it the contract expiration, or was it an agent that was within that company left, so you kind of tagged along? Like,
Yeah, that was the first situation. So I was
Gotcha.
really attached to the manager that I basically started with. And I
Right.
still love them. We're really good friends. We're working on a couple things together still. But where I am right now with like different things going on, and I've been doing it for so long, I kind of feel like I needed more representation on the commercial side, because a lot of the brand deals I get are kind of like a joint commercial plus social partnership. And I realized that sometimes those can be really lucrative partnerships that don't take up ad space on your feed. Because something that I struggle with is feeling like I've been doing this for how long, and I'm like still posting ads, and it doesn't feel great sometimes, you know, but like you got to pay the bills. So just exploring something a little different to see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the common themes is, you know, everyone evolves and grows in different ways, right? So someone in the beginning, when you're just starting out, you know, a manager is going to be much more sort of, you know, blocking and tackling. Their job is essentially just to respond and get through and to prioritize things that are coming in.
Right.
But then toward the end, it might be, or at another stage, not the end, but at another stage, it might be just like high level strategy only, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like day to day, they have someone else that's helping you day to day, but then, you know, you're really only going to them for the brain trust of like, okay, cool, what's our 5-year goal? What's our 10-year goal? Versus what are we going to do in the next 5 days or 5 weeks, right?
100%. Yeah.
That's interesting. So I guess how much has your content evolved? Obviously, I know it has evolved a lot, but I guess how has it evolved, and how deliberate have you been with how it's evolved?
I feel like I'm a pretty intuitive person when it comes to content, which is like a good thing and a bad thing. But sometimes I don't really think too much about it. I'm kind of just like, oh, I feel like posting this today, so I try it and see what happens. But from the beginning, it was purely food. And then I realized that there are a lot of limitations with veganism, obviously. Like there are just so many brands I can't work with, or I should say I won't work with. Cruelty-free is another thing for me. We were talking a little bit about like food dyes, but things like leather, like there's just so many things that are off the table for me. And I think having that lifestyle component and just the personal element really opens up a lot of doors too, because now it's like, okay, I can work with airports. I can work with travel boards. There's just a little bit more flexibility in terms of brand partnerships and opportunities, which I really like. But also it's nice because if I'm not in the mood to cook, or let's say I'm traveling, for work and I just can't put together a recipe video that day, like there's more flexibility in terms of like what I can post. So I found it to be very helpful for me in terms of just like feeling like it's not so rigid. And yeah, I also think there's a little bit of something for everyone. I don't know if it's the best necessarily for growth, because I think the algorithms really like a very specific type of content and people know what to expect. But as it is, I don't think veganism is something that has like mass appeal necessarily. So I'm like very okay with having like multiple elements, like something for everyone,
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I struggled and continuously struggle with as well. Because I started my content creator journey as a cooking creator.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I started making cooking videos on TikTok. Pandemic relationship, like many people. And I had an initial spike on TikTok. Like I grew like 300,000 followers in a span of a few months. And then I started sharing my interest in different topics. Like this was the moment of BLM. I just had a few things that I wanted to share. And I noticed the algo was just not rewarding me with the same type of engagement. And then I was like, okay, this is clearly not sustainable, because first, I'm not a cook. I'm not a chef. Like I'm just whipping up 된장찌개 recipes at the crib. Like,
right.
How many times can I make fried rice? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I was like, we gotta, what can we do here that I'm interested in, and also scale? Because I think that's one thing that we often have trouble figuring out, is like, how do you do something repeatedly and scale? And in the midst of that, we started highlighting restaurants, and we're gonna order from a restaurant.
Oh,
right now.
what a transition!
Yeah.
What did we pick? Oh, Le Botaniste. Okay, great.
And since you are a vegan,
yes,
we are going to respect your choice and go for a vegan meal today.
I feel like this is one that I brought like my parents to, and they're very critical of vegan food, so I feel confident in this one.
Yeah.
How do you want to do it? Do you want to do like a couple things and we like share it so you can try?
Yeah, do you want to do family style?
Yeah, I'm down for family
perfect.
style. And
So
you're the
then-
first person that suggested family style. I
Oh,
think,
really?
Yeah, because you're the first East Asian Wait, hold up. Do we have an East Asian person on?
Andrew.
Andrew Fung. Yeah, we had him on.
I guess that was family style too.
Yeah, that was
He kinda
family style
worked.
too. Yeah.
He asked, though. He just
Yeah,
kinda-
it was like, yo, let me just order this. Yeah.
feel
Now,
like
that's
it's just great.
interesting. Yeah, I wonder if it's an East Asian thing.
100%.
Definitely is.
I just love it because you can try like multiple things,
100%,
So I'm a
yeah.
big fan.
Saliva culture.
What is it?
Saliva culture.
The saliva culture. Yeah.
What do Koreans call it? Like I'm in music.
Yeah. I mean, we're sharing bathtubs together. It's a mess. It's a mess. That's why
I asked you that. Did we make a video on that controversy
about what?
about like the
double dipping.
no, not double dipping, but like if someone, like
you were-
gendip, like gendip.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you're reaching for the gendip,
Yeah.
and like, or your partner is,
Yeah.
would you feel some kind of way if I hold it down so that CJ can?
Oh yeah, nah. So yeah,
That's a whole thing,
That
right?
was a whole dumb controversy in Korea. It was like,
Oh, really?
So like, how familiar are you with Korean food?
Pretty familiar.
Okay,
yeah.
got you. So there's a dish called gendip, which is the perilla leaves
Yeah.
that's like marinated, and because they're marinated, it's really hard to like pull them out.
Right. It's like
Yeah, it's
stacked.
like all stacked together. So like, let's say, my relationship partner, my wife, basically. My wife is here, and then you're here, and then we're like eating together, and you need to go for the gendip, right? And I'm hold it for you so you could take the leaf off, as a gesture of kindness.
Right.
Like, is it valid for her to get tight? to get mad. So that was a whole debate in Korea. It's
was a
like
big debate.
Yeah,
In Korea? Oh,
some girls were
interesting.
like, yeah, of course I'll be mad. Like, why are you holding the Kenya for the other bitch? Like, you know what I mean? Or some shit like that. But I was like, is it that deep? You know what I mean? But some girls were like, yeah, it is that deep because that's some
intimate?
intimate, it's an intimate relationship, of course. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, like anyways. That was a whole sidetrack conversation. But
Because you're talking about sharing.
yeah, we were talking about
And East
sharing.
Asian.
Yeah.
Right.
Family style ordering.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. Anyways, so we were talking about me, right? I was talking about myself.
We're
Right.
talking about the creator journey.
Yeah, creator journey, how diversifying your content could be challenging because the algorithm doesn't necessarily reward that. So you said that you share the same sentiment. What have you been doing to combat that? Or have you just said, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to have a slower growth, but build a stronger community?
I think slower growth, stronger community is definitely the way that I lean. Also because feels very niche sometimes. Like there are definitely a lot of elements that don't have mass appeal, like I said earlier, but I also feel like it's important to make it sustainable for the creator to do their work, basically, because a lot of it is passion driven. Like I feel very strongly that it's a type of work you have to love to do because you're not getting paid every single day. Like brand deals come in, but you have to be willing to post every single day, essentially, no matter if that video goes viral or not, or if you get paid for it. And I think that's really difficult for a lot of people when there's no immediate reward. And if you have the love of doing it, I feel like that's what kind of keeps you going and makes you successful as a creator that's able to like hang on for so long. And I have a lot of friends that have kind of phased out from 10 years ago. They just stopped posting, they abandoned like their blogs and stuff like that because it is really tiring when you feel like you're creating just to feed the algorithm. I think to an extent that's important, but I try to balance it with a little bit of both. So I'm like, okay, these are some trends I feel like I should hit. These are some SEO rich recipes that I should probably post. But in between that, if I don't post things I just feel like posting, it just becomes very sterile to me and doesn't feel personal. And it's like, I almost feel like that content doesn't perform because you could feel that I don't care about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about like the sustainability, and it is basically an extension of me. Like I'm right now trying to figure out how I separate work and personal life a little bit more, but it is basically like an extension of myself, it feels like. So authenticity and like the sustainability is really, really important to me.
Can you walk us through like a day for you? Like,
Yeah.
And what's your team look like?
So it's basically just me. I now have one assistant who's like, oh my gosh, transformed my life. The reason why I had to hire her was because when I was working on the cookbook, I was doing that in addition to everything that I'll tell you about that I do in a day. But I usually start the day with gym or some kind of movement because if I don't get it in the morning, it just doesn't happen. And I feel like I start the day with a clearer mind. In the mornings is when I really like to do emails for like an hour or so. And then I just get into like cooking, creating. So a lot of the content and shooting is like what I really enjoy. Actually, it's the editing that I don't love as much. So when the sun's out, that's kind of what I'm creating because I use a lot of natural light. And then the latter half of the day is when I'm like editing, doing more admin stuff, and then sending emails back again. So I'll try to hit it like twice a day. But then of course, like sometimes there are like events and stuff like that that really breaks up the day. And I feel like living in LA, it's a lot harder to adjust to that. So I try to separate. These are days I'm at home filming. These are days that I'm like out filming. And these are just like event networking days. I'm going to be out and about. In New York, I feel like it was a little different because I could really squeeze in so much into a day. But in LA, it's just like, you have to be very intentional, I feel like, about where you're going to be for the day.
For sure. Do you schedule in time off?
I do. I actually like to take off days in the middle of the week just because I feel like it's a little quieter when I'm like doing things out and about. I love working on weekends just because no one's emailing me and it's like quiet. I feel like I just have like the best work done on the weekends when I don't feel like this time crunch kind of. But I definitely am a workaholic. So I have a huge problem with like feeling like I can turn even rest days or just like things I'm doing for leisure into content.
100%.
And I think a lot of it goes back to just being the type of person to really document everything. Like I've always been that way, even before Instagram was a thing. I would just take pictures of everything. So I feel like now more than ever, I'm like, well, I don't know, I could use this maybe later. And I just find myself like documenting. So I think a true break for me would have to be like someone's got to lock my phone up, Like,
Have you done that before? Have you gone?
I have not,
Yeah.
but it's planned for April.
Yeah, no, that's
Oh, wow.
That's a good approach because I'm the same way. I
Yeah.
shoot everything. I'm constantly thinking, oh, that could be content. This could be content.
Right.
Oh, it's a cool looking toilet. definitely taking a video of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but how much of this strategy came from, somebody essentially advising you, or how much of it came from just experience?
I think it was mostly experience. I think I'm glad that I worked in corporate for a little bit. I think I have a very type A personality in that sense. I like to be organized. I like to, be very on top of things. But a lot of it just came from like seeing what worked and also what worked for me, and just my personality type. Like, how can I do this in a way that makes sense to me and like I feel good about it, but also like is sustainable. I think now having so many years under my belt, I'm like taking a little bit more time to think of it like big picture and just think about like what are the things that I love to do in this job, what are the things I dislike doing or maybe someone's better at doing, just because I think for the longevity it's like really important to me that I like either add more people to my team or figure out how to streamline a little bit more.
Do you have OKRs, KPIs? Do you have like a programming output goal? Do you have certain day? Do you have a programming mix where you're like I want to be able to do X percentage lifestyle, X percentage cooking?
No, I have to admit I'm very averse to like numbers. I don't know, like the whole idea of just getting like too analytic with me is like I kind of get like nervous. Like even looking at my own analytics, I'm like, I don't want to look at it.
Even as a consultant.
Terrible. I know, which is I think also why I didn't last in that job. But I was just like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to know what my numbers look like. I don't want to know what my demographics are like. So a lot of it is just very like, okay, I feel like this is working. Let's do it again. Or like, what's the element of this video that did well? And I kind of just go like that. But as far as the split, I think of content in like different buckets, and then from there like maybe a couple sub buckets, and then whenever I'm like in a rut, I'm like I don't know what to post today, I just think of like, okay, what have I not posted in a while, and I'll go with that. But I think my biggest issue is that I have such a backlog of content that's unedited, but I keep creating new content. So I think like eventually I need to sit down, turn the camera off, stop filming, and then like just edit everything that I have,
or hire a team.
Or that.
Yeah. I guess how did you find your assistant? Is it virtual or is it in person?
It's a mix. And I found her on Instagram actually. And we had never communicated on Instagram before, but I kind of liked that because I felt like she knew enough about me, but wasn't too invested, because I've had assistants in the past when I lived in New York where we were almost like best friends. And I think it gets like very tricky fast, like mixing friendship and work. I feel like I'm like family with everyone I work with, but you got to like maintain a boundary, I think, and make sure the intention is there to like, hey, we're working at the end of the day, So she's great. Her brother is vegan. And I feel like that was like a big connector for us too, because she really understands a lot of the nuances of like what is and isn't vegan, what to look for, what to ask for. It's been like invaluable in terms of how helpful it's been.
There was one thing that you mentioned about you had to implement certain type of structure because you now live in LA compared to when you were in New York. Can you tell us the difference?
I think the biggest difference is just, well, number one, I don't have a license because I don't know how to drive being from New York. So that's a huge barrier.
Whoa, in LA.
So I'm like a rideshare customer big time. But I also think it's helpful for me because it makes me a little bit more intentional about like where I'm spending my time. And in New York, I feel like I'm barely home, but in LA, like I really love being at home. And I think that's by design too, right? Like the apartments are smaller in New York because you spend more of your time out. In LA, you're kind of like distant from everyone, so you really spend time at home. But I think I've like leaned into that a little bit more and been able to make it feel like my home is really my studio, like paint the kitchen pink, make it a place where I want to be. I spend a lot more time at home. And then when I have things to do out, I try to just like condense it into either a specific day where I'm like, okay, this day I'm just committed to like not worrying about posting something, not worrying about editing something or filming. And I think that mindset helps me a lot. So I don't feel like, oh my God, I need to rush home before the sun sets and like film something. Cause I would joke with my mom that I feel like Shrek. It's like, I really need to like be home before the sun's down to like get this piece of content done, Now it's like, all right, I know this day is like, we're not filming. So I think that helps me a lot is just like setting the intention for the day.
How did your parents accept the fact that you've decided to take off from your corporate gig to do this thing on the internet? Do they understand what you do?
My parents understand now. I think my grandparents are like on the fence. When I started working with more Asian brands, then my grandparents understood, or brands they recognize. Like Target was big for them. They're like, oh, okay. Like I know that brand. I still don't know what you do, but I know that brand,
That was big for my parents.
Yeah.
They share that YouTube video with
exactly.
all their family, friends.
And my family was involved in the video too. So I think for them, it was like, oh my God, this is like really special. And they understood like when their friends started to be like, I saw you guys in a Target thing. And they're like, oh my God, I get it now a little bit. So I think they're understanding a little bit more, but it's still like, you never know.
We were in the same campaign.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. But my parents, they're pretty, I mean, they're Asian, but they're very progressive, I feel like, for Asian people. I would say our family is definitely very Asian in many ways, but when it comes to like jobs, like they never pushed me to be like a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. I think maybe in my head, I pressured myself, and psychology was my way to be like, well, I might go to medical school. Like maybe I could, you know, I didn't.
My
I had
parents
no
didn't
plans.
push me because they knew that I'm not gonna be able to handle it. Like, they're like, yo, you can't be a doctor.
I respect that. You know, that's like,
Like,
you got to know your limitations. And same for me, because I never did well in math. Like it was really a struggle for me when I was in high school. So I think psychology was like the one thing I really loved. And then when it came time to finding a job, I was like, how do I apply this into something that actually makes money? Because a lot of the, I guess, trajectory of the career path is like, you could do social work, you could do like counseling, you could do a lot of like pro bono work until you get a real job, or you open a clinic, or you work at a clinic. And for me, I was like, let's make it more business and let's do consulting. So I was in human resources. When I quit, I think what was important to me was for my parents to know the dollar amount that I'd been offered, to be like, I did the math. I'm not great at math, but I figured out I have this many months. I'll be okay. So I'll figure it out. And if it doesn't work out, worst case, like I'll get a retail job. I'll get like some kind of job. Like one thing about me is that I always had a job of some kind, and I never had to be pushed to like stay on top of my finances. So I think they weren't worried about me in that sense, but they did tell me at the time, like, you know, you only spent 3 months at this job and you're going to leave. Like that looks really bad on a resume. So just make sure that this is what you're going to do. You know, I had no idea if it was going to work or not, but I think also my parents understood that for me, it was more about the mental health aspect. Like I just can't be in this environment. And no matter what job I have at this point in life, I'm not going to do well. So I told them it was a leave. I ended up quitting. And then I told them maybe a couple months after I knew it was going to work out. So yeah.
yeah.
And let's talk about like, so that's the past, but like talk about the future. What do you, I know you're working on your book right now. What's the next 5 years look like for you?
5 years. I think I've realized that content will forever be something that I love to do because I love creating. So I don't think it's ever going to be something that I stop necessarily, but I'm working on a product launch, which will be something later this year. And I feel like it's a natural extension of the brand, but also just ensures that I can kind of do less branded content, which I think is really important to me because that makes me feel like I have, I guess, more ownership of like all the content that I'm posting versus relying on brands.
Well, can you share, is it a consumer product? Okay.
It's going to be a matcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
On brand.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. It's going to be, I mean, I think that's one thing that I feel like I'm always posting about, and I never second guess it when I post it. So feels good. And I think a lot of people will be expecting it. I don't think it's like a surprise, but that, and then the cookbook was the first tangible product that I really did aside from like merch. And so it's been really nice to have like more offline projects, I guess you could say, like things you could hold in your hands, because knowing that you have selling power, I think is also really important and different than just like getting engagement. You know, that lets me know that I can actually move product and like put my energy and time and money into like making physical products. So it's a good feeling, but scary.
Do you mind diving into, and you don't have to, but how involved were you with the matcha?
So actually when I lived in New York, so during COVID, right before the pandemic was when I started thinking about doing my own matcha brand, because I had been working with this Japanese brand that I love still for many, many years. And
Which brand is it?
Iporo.
Ipuro. Oh,
Ipuro,
okay.
yeah, it's like a Japanese brand. They're awesome. And I was doing affiliate work for them basically for a really long time and making like so much work, so much money off of affiliate marketing, which I'd never really done before, because I think affiliate marketing is very like, you get out of it what you put into it. And I can't, you know, there's not many things I could post about so much and not feel drained by.
Interesting. So I never took on an affiliate marketing project, but it does work.
Yeah. And
100%.
it's funny because like, there's not many things I would do affiliate marketing for, but for that one, I was like, well, I drink matcha 1, if not 2 times a day. So, you know, happy to post about it. And I threw it in like a couple of ebooks that I have, and like, it just felt very natural. It's in like my YouTube descriptions whenever someone would ask me like, what matcha are you drinking? And then that was also helpful for me because I wanted to see, okay, what does it look like to sell something? Like, do I actually have the ability to like move products. And through that, I was able to see, okay, this is like my number one selling product out of everything that I've ever done. So took that data and I was like, I feel like I should do my own because I've always wanted to. And also like there aren't that many matcha brand founders that are actually Japanese. Specifically speaking about like US companies, a lot of them are owned by white men or just white people in general, but a lot of them are white men. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think part of it is cultural. Like I feel like doing business in Japan, it's a little bit more reserved, if you know what I mean. Like it doesn't have that same in your face marketing effect that maybe you see in the US. So
totally
there's
the opposite
why.
of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't like to do sales. They don't really like to push things. It's let the product speak for itself. But when no one is speaking for the product, like what are you going to do, right? So I was like, instead of complaining about the fact that there are no Asian founders or Japanese founders specifically, like, why don't I just try? So I found a farm that I really loved. And then that connection kind of dissolved during COVID because I was like, you know, I don't feel like it's the right time to like, I can't even go to Japan. So I was like, let me just put this on pause. Then many years later, I was like, I don't know if I have the time or the space for this. And then recently, like as of a year ago, I was like, you know, I feel like this is something I should do. I should pick it up again because if I don't do it now, like someone else is going to do it. But also like, I'll always wonder if it would have worked out, you know? So yeah, I would say.
So you source the farms yourself. You're reaching out individually.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And
great.
that was difficult.
So you're going through like, what are your MOQs? Can I sit with you? And you're doing all of that right
Yeah.
now. Are you raising money?
No, so this is going to be all, originally it was going to be all self-funded. Now I'm working with a partner, but it's still very like small budget. We're not like putting too much money into it. And I think that's the way to go because I don't know necessarily if it's going to be like the next big thing for me. It may or it may not. It might just be a side thing, but I feel like starting bare bones is always the way I've done things, like even with merch and anything I've sold. And then if it has legs, like it'll take off and then you can put the money in.
So
you know?
Are you handling?
Are you planning to make it a direct to consumer or are you trying to make it wholesale?
Yeah, I think direct to consumer. I'm not trying to like target cafes or anything. Like if there's interest with like certain friends of mine that are cafe owners, like sure, we'll do that. But to be honest, with really good matcha, there's usually a limited quantity available each year too. So you have to also be intentional about like if you're gonna start wholesaling, you're gonna need a lot more matcha, which usually means you have to be willing to sell
Downgrade your
variety.
quality.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got you.
So you're really going after capturing the high end,
Yeah. I would say
high end premium. Very
Right.
Yeah.
higher end. I feel like a lot of my content, I have a separate page just for matcha. And on that account, a lot of the content is really focused on like education and understanding why is it that the price is so much higher and why is it worth paying for. So it's not a product that's going to be for everyone because I know, you know, it's expensive. It's going to be somewhat expensive compared to what people are used to seeing. But when you do the math, it's a lot cheaper than going to like your Starbucks every day. You know, making it at home already cuts down the cost so much. So
Is it pre-made powder where you actually have to grind it? And
it'll be pre-ground, but just the pure powder. Okay. Yeah. So you'll have to like whisk it, make your latte at home. But I think that's part of the brand and part of what I love to do on social media is
so
like,
it's not just like powder in a pack.
No.
Okay, got
It's like take the moment for yourself. You know, it takes like 2 minutes, honestly. Like we all have 2 minutes for ourselves.
Got you. What were you about to ask?
Oh no, I mean just more logistical questions. Are you going to be handling your own 3PL? Like, are you literally mailing the stuff out yourself? Are you going to have a partner doing that? What do you?
So I tested that out, like the shipping it out yourself method when I was doing merch, and that was kind of why I did it. Oh my gosh, it's labor.
Yeah.
Like I have an Oura ring. I thought I was working out. It's like I had to be like log the work. I was like, sure.
Like,
no,
I
it's
cut
really
myself so many times like wrapping the tape.
no, for real.
Yo.
But I also wanted to understand like what that felt like and like have the
100%.
experience because I didn't know if it was going to be like worth paying for someone to do it or not. But I think with the matcha and it being a food product, the storage is important, but also like I want to make sure people get their stuff on time. Like if I'm having a bad day and I don't want to go to the post office, like I don't want that to be the reason that someone doesn't get their matcha, you know?
100%.
So yeah, I'm going to be doing that with a partner, which will be very helpful. And also I feel like that's going to allow me to keep doing the content and everything else that like fuels that business. So yeah.
Do you have a mentor? Because it seems like, I mean, you've had a very short stint in this corporate job and straight out of college, you basically just jumped into this realm that wasn't really solidified. I mean, 10 years ago, there wasn't Colin and Samir or, well, there was Colin and Samir, but it wasn't like.
They were doing something else.
Yeah, they were doing something else. I mean, there wasn't Creators Lunch, that's for sure, 10 years ago. So where are you getting all this intel on, okay, cool, this is what I need to do. This is the SEO that I need to hit. This is what I need to do with the CPG company. Because sure, like through experience and research, you could learn a lot of it.
Yeah.
But it also seems like, you're very much organized.
I think it's a lot of trial and error because you hear advice from friends, but I think what I've realized is everybody has their own approach. Even when it comes to something as specific as SEO for food blogging, I'll hear conflicting advice from like two of my friends. So I kind of feel like you have to take everything with a grain of salt and then figure out what works for you. And I know that I hate very analytical things like SEO. So for me, it kind of like doesn't matter. I have to just like see what sticks. But as far as like CPG stuff, I don't really have a mentor. It's kind of like the same thing, like going by feel, which is probably not the best approach, if I was going to give advice to someone, but I think that's the way that I've always done it. And like learning from mistakes almost, or learning from experience. I did have one friend who was a creator or is a creator and then created like a beauty brand, who was like kind of my mentor in the very beginning, but this was during COVID times. And so when that ball sort of dropped, I never revisited that with her, but I feel like I have a very supportive community of friends like around me who all have experience in maybe one aspect or another. So if ever there's a question, I feel like there's usually someone I can kind of ask. But again, it's like the advice I get, I have to just like see how far it takes me, because it might not be the best scenario for like my situation.
I mean, that's incredible that you've been able to come this far with like just pure intuition, right? Because I think one of the things, no, I mean, really, right? Just like that's a testament to like how talented you are and how well you are doing and executing and just moving the ball forward. I think one of the things that we want this thing to be is a resource for people to try to think even more intentionally about what they're working on, right? So if you're looking at matcha, like, I mean, you're a consultant, but like, what's the addressable market for green tea? And specifically high-end premium small batch green tea. Okay, great. What is that, right? Or I find it funny that you said, niche market, but like if you started in 2017 even, in earnest, it's like, look at the information around veganism and being a vegan from then to now. It's like, It's so different, right?
Yeah.
And you actually caught a wave, right? You caught a wave in terms of like an addressable market, right?
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, even when you're within that, we have friends that were working with the same brands. We've actually invested in some protein alternatives, right? But like, there's people
That flopped.
yeah, they're struggling right now, but they're struggling. We're still holding on to one. No, but like even that, it's like having the foresight to say, oh, hey, whether it's a matcha company or an alternative protein company, it's like, well, it's cool doing an affiliate deal, but like, can we actually invest in that? Like all these types of things, right? That's what we want to turn creators onto, because like at the end of the day, everything is a commodity. I think everything is going to become a commodity, and whether you're selling green tea or matcha or Impossible Burger or whatever it might be, they need you more than you need them.
I think it's interesting. I have experimented a little bit with investing, but I think the brands that are reaching out to me to invest in them are these like smaller vegan companies that are very much in this phase of like, we don't even know if this is going to go anywhere. So like you might see your money back in 10 years or you might not. And it's also very hard because I think I love business, but I don't love the idea of it. Like I don't really think about numbers that much. I don't think about KPI, but I'm also very intentional with what I do and very, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, I feel like I'm business minded without having necessarily the experience or the numbers. I don't really think about that stuff. I get very contract averse. Like I'm like terrified when I get a contract. I just send it to my manager. I hate to see it. If someone sends me an email that's like, hey, can you attach these? And I'm like, oh God, I can't do this for like 3 days. It's so bad. But at the same time, I think I'm like a very emotionally in tune person. And that's kind of what drives everything for me, which is, I think, a blessing and a curse. So it's a weird combo. Like I feel like I can feel what works, but it also holds me back sometimes, because if I was a little bit more business savvy and just very like into it, I would be able to make decisions based on that alone.
Totally.
How much, if you would have to deem it as traits that you're not the best at, does your manager or people around you or your team kind of offload that for you?
Definitely the contract side. I feel like my managers take that off my plate completely. So I love that. Emails, I feel like I still like to be the first point of contact because there are a lot of vegan brands that I can't be sending my rates to and being like, hey, like this is what I'm going to charge you to like try your protein bar. Like there are some brands that I've built really good relationships with just because I believe in the product. And I'm like, I know you have no budget. Let me try it. If I love it, I'll share it anyway, you know, which is also like, again, sometimes that's a curse.
Can we dive in there actually? So like you actually reply with rates?
I don't, but what I'll usually do is I reply first, kind of like get to know the person. Cause also like sometimes you go to an event like Expo and you want to be able to like put a name to the face. And sometimes if I work with a brand and I've never made contact, I have no idea who's on the other end. So I like to like have some kind of relationship with the brand. And because also like if I want to do something on an organic level in the future, like I know who to reach out to about like, hey, I have this charity event. Hey, I have this like donation opportunity. So that's like my big thing. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but on the rate side, like I don't really touch that at all.
One of the things we haven't talked about, but I want to talk about is a lot of folks reach out expecting us to do their job, right? So what we get is we get these like random like cold emails and they're like, hey, so we have this campaign and we'd be very interested in, can you, and then tell us what your rate is and what your deliverables would be and what your
deliverables would be.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so they're literally trying to just comb information and say, okay, here's what it is. Are you another creator? Are you willing to do this? Not so much today, but like that we get a lot of that.
In the beginning, it was a lot of fishing.
Yeah,
and I was like, yo, fuck out of here. So like, go do your job, yo.
Yeah, so that's what made me think about like, oh, can you send me your rates? And typically now, if we don't get so much of that, it's just more like we want to work with you.
Yeah.
What do you think? And then we're like,
yeah.
okay, cool. For that, we think, you know what I mean? It's a little different.
I feel like when it comes to business, I appreciate a direct email. I mean, the best emails are when they come to you and say, these are the deliverables. This is the budget we have to offer. Yes or no. Yeah. And then you negotiate from there. Because then I know you're serious. Like you've really thought about it. You've profiled me. You want to work with me for a reason. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, I think the most interesting thing is when a brand reaches out and they're like, hey, can we send you a box of cookies and you do X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, I'm really sorry, but like I live in New York or I live in LA. Like I just can't do it for a box of cookies, right? And then they're like, oh my God, okay, now we have budget. And you're like, oh, interesting, right? Yeah. So sometimes like the power of saying no is really important too. But yeah, it's like the Wild West, I think still, you know, doing brand partnerships. There's no like rules really. There's no regulation in terms of like pricing and everyone's got such different rates. So I think it's difficult sometimes. What
goes into your rate, I guess, in terms of how much has it changed from you just saying, oh, you should get double that or ask for double? Are you being intentional about like, okay, you know, usage or any tips there?
Yeah. I think usage is a huge deal for me just because I always create very high quality content. I always use a real camera and I try to edit in a way that I feel like can be used by another brand for like even an ad that they want to run on social, but also like digitally. Like that's happened to me a lot before. So I think there's a lot of value in terms of the quality.
So do you shoot, what do you shoot on?
So more in the past, but I would do like photography for brands, image creation, and they could use it for then, let's say a poster, a billboard or something like that, or run ads with it. And I use a Canon camera, and I also like doing a lot of recipe development. And I feel like that's a skill you can charge for because you're shooting the recipe, but you're also like providing the recipe that you know works and tastes good with their product. So it's a lot of like, there's a lot of behind the scenes work. I feel like that goes into it. Now we kind of have like ballpark ranges for what my rates look like for different things. Like, is it an Instagram post? Is it a YouTube post? And then we'll add on usage, exclusivity, and things like that, which I don't really touch very much anymore, but it's definitely a lot more clear, like what we're charging for. I think sometimes it's tricky though, because let's say it's a brand that like you're not super passionate about, like it aligns, but you're like, ugh, this brief is really tight. I don't know if like I want to say these lines necessarily. Like we might charge more for that just because I know this is going to be like a tougher sell and I need to put more effort into it. Or it's like, I can't possibly shoot this video by myself. Like I'm going to need to like pay someone to like be there to help me or like whatever it is. So I think I price pretty fairly. I feel like maybe numbers wise, my prices may seem high to some people, but I'm really confident in the quality of my content always. And I think that that's really important to know. Like there's value in the content itself. But I feel like it's also why I'm very passionate about like making sure that friends of mine know that they really need to charge appropriately for what they're providing. Because when TikTok started, especially, you had these like people who were just doing it for fun on the side that were like, oh my God, $50 would be awesome on the side. But not understanding that accepting that rate was making it difficult for creators who do this full time to like make a living, because all of a sudden it's like, hey, we cannot pay you thousands of dollars. We're going to pay this dude for $50 and it's going to blow up. Right. So you're like, how do I justify my value?
But
It's
I mean,
hard.
even that wave has already subsided, right?
Absolutely.
Because those guys that was charging 50, 250, whatever, like ballpark range that is minimal. Yeah, I mean, they're not full-time content creators anymore.
Right.
You know, they went back to their day jobs.
Yeah, and it's really tricky, I think, for creators, because you obviously imagine that, like, let's say you get a couple million on TikTok, you're like, oh my God, I made it, right? Like, I had friends who were like surpassing me very quickly, but they're like, how come I'm not getting brand deals? Like, why am I not seeing the returns? And like, why do I still have to work a regular job, right?
Because you're like cursing in every video. You know what I mean? Shorty's like doing wild things. Yeah, so of course you're not gonna get a brand deal, ma.
Are you yeah, so Race to the Bottom, are you part of any sort of organizations, or like, you know, another creator that we had on, they're part of like a group chat, right? And where they'll actually share rates.
Oh,
right?
interesting.
Kind of like a little cartel.
Yeah, or
Okay, I
or
like
now
that.
there's that new website. I mean, there's a lot of these services popping up. There's one
Right.
like Fuck You Pay Me, right? Right.
That's the name of the
Yeah,
account.
yeah.
This young lady going around, transparency about contracts, about
Okay.
rates.
Yeah.
I think I have heard of that site.
Yeah.
I'm not part of anything like that, but I try to be pretty open with friends of mine when they reach out and they're like, hey, how much did, I almost like dropped the name. How much did this brand pay you for this partnership? And I'll tell them, because I'm like, there's no harm in me telling you what the rate is. But sometimes it's very disappointing. Like, you end up on a brand trip, you compare rates and realize like, oh, we are thousands of dollars off, you know, and that really sucks. But I think that's what's tricky sometimes about being like emotional in business, is that if I really align with the mission, I'm like, oh, you don't have that budget? Like, that's okay. I'll still do it anyway. Oh, you're vegan? Like, I'll still do it. So,
And also, I
Yeah.
mean, I sometimes I do gotta respect the vanity metric too.
Absolutely.
Right. So if like a friend of mine has double or triple my account numbers and he's getting double
oh yeah.
what I'm getting
Absolutely.
paid for the same deliverable, I'm not sweating.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all good. You know, you did your
100%.
thing, you know.
And I think the tricky thing sometimes too is that I feel so grateful for what we do. And I'm not saying it's an easy job by any means, but there are some days where I'm like, oh my God, this content is just like flowing. I got it on the first take and I'm like, okay, great. That was like this check. And it feels so easy that I'm like, well, how could I expect more, you know?
Yeah,
So
100,000%.
So in terms of your revenue and your business, like what percentage is branded? What percentage is the book? What percentage is the, you know, I think you said you're now with
You're asking
model.
the most numeric question.
To someone that doesn't like, no, well, I guess this also just comes down to like how you're spending your time, right, Remy?
Yeah.
Like, you know, the book,
Yeah.
we haven't done it. Like, we have an agent. We literally haven't done it because we don't have time.
Yeah,
that's
man.
how I felt too.
Like we
Yeah.
just don't have time. Like we don't have time.
I need to holler at my agent.
yeah,
I
it's a
think
2-year
I think he forgot about us.
I mean, I still check in with him on IG, but like,
That's so
yeah,
funny.
it's yeah, like,
Your contract.
Yeah, it's-
you haven't moved on this in like a year.
yeah, I mean, and it's purely a resource thing.
Yeah, it's a
Well, I think for us, let's be candid, it's a resource thing in terms of like, it's not going to be meaningful revenue wise, but
Right.
but it was never supposed to be.
Right.
And number two, the lead time doesn't work for us because we're very used to having, you know, a shorter feedback loop.
Yeah.
Like we
Yes.
want to be able to make something, put it out, and get feedback right
Yep.
away, right?
Yep.
And
Whereas
that's
a book is what, minimal 18 months. So like, even if I get a book deal today, that's not hitting the stands until end of next year or
Absolutely.
the year after next year. You know what I mean?
and even
So-
the way that book is produced. I mean, for a cookbook or a recipe book, like you're like, no, I could do it myself. They're like, no, we got to get you a photo editor. We got to get you
Yeah.
this. We got to get this. We got to do that. I mean, you want to talk about that process and what that's been like for you?
I'd love to. And hopefully it's like helpful advice for you guys too, because I sat on my book deal for a long time. I actually had a publisher reach out in 2019. And this was right before COVID too. So a lot of things I just was like, it's not the right time, you know? And meanwhile, I'm like in bed, like watching Netflix, but I feel like it's got to be the right time, but there's also never going to be a right time. So what I did was I signed the contract because I think I work well under pressure. So I knew that like, okay, if I sign it, I'm going to make it happen. Even if that's like in the last month of that 18-month period, I'm going to make it happen. But I think what's helpful is if you have an agent, it almost feels like you're a manager, but on the book side, to facilitate that like conversation between you and the publisher.
But you had the publisher reach out, then you found an agent?
So yeah, that kind of like, it fell off so hard that basically I like approached it as a new book. I got an agent to hopefully keep me on track and give me guidance on the proposal. And I found that to be very helpful because they are kind of expecting things from you. So you can, of course, let your agent know like, hey, can you check in on me on these dates? Or I have a friend who's doing it where she has deliverables each month, and that's a little bit more approachable for her to like stay on track. What ended up happening for me was like they just gave me free range, so I kind of did end up cramming it in the last like 2 months, doing like 100 recipes. And
Wow.
I do not recommend that because that's when I hired my assistant, and the schedule was we'd wake up, we'd do social media facing content during Shrek hours, daylight hours. Then in the evening, I would start at like 4 to 7 with her, and we'd do 3 to 4 recipes because you don't need lighting for that. We're not shooting anything, just testing. And we did that for like, I want to say almost 2 months nonstop. And it was the worst time of my life, but also like very exciting. And then once that was wrapped, you think you're done and like the worst is not over because then you go through the edit period and it's like this never ending project. But to be honest, once it's in motion, like you just make it happen, you know? So even if it feels like you don't have the right time, I think at least hiring one person to oversee and make sure you get things done on time is super helpful. And then hiring a team for me was invaluable. The publisher suggested that I had a food stylist, food photographer, which I was very on board with because I knew that if I did it myself, it'd be like, it would take me probably triple the time. It's like, it's not perfect, you know? And so that was very helpful to have that off my plate. And now it's like in print finally. But yeah, it's a very rewarding process, but I totally understand what you mean about feeling like it's something that you're not going to see or hold in your hands for like 2 years, basically, because I don't think I've heard of a book being published in less than that time frame.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now that the book is done, how does it feel?
It's a little daunting because I think I realized at the end of it how much time, effort, and also money has gone into the book. I think like managing expectations has been helpful for me so that I don't expect too much out of this book, but I'm just excited that it's here and that it's happened. And I've created something awesome and like tangible, you know? So I am really excited, but it is of course like nerve-wracking to promote yourself. I feel like I have no problem posting brand deals, but when it comes to my own stuff, I'm like,
Why?
I feel like I've posted myself too much. Like, I don't know. It's just something I have to like overcome, I think.
Interesting.
You know?
How'd you find your book agent?
So my first book agent I found by just like reaching out to friends and seeing if anyone had connections. But ultimately I found her by like going to Barnes and Nobles. I opened up books that I liked, looked at the acknowledgements, and I was like, okay, I love this book and I want to do something similar. Let me find the agent and
Oh,
reach
wow.
out.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Nah, that's dope. I respect that. That like you take agency and you just take initiative and go after it.
Well, I didn't know anything about the book world, so I didn't even know what the agencies were. You know, if I had more knowledge, maybe I'd be like, okay, these are like the big 3, I'll reach out. I had no idea. So I had to kind of just look at the proof of concept, like this is the book, it's beautiful, I love how it turned out, let me reach out to this person.
And then how much are you going into, here's what I love that you did, tell us what that pitch to that person was like.
So I basically reached out and asked if they had availability to take on someone. And I had a lot of questions at that point. I think my email was like mostly questions because I didn't know anything about writing a book. I was like, how fast can we do this? What do you need from me? This is my idea. Do you think it's going to sell? And these are the books that I've loved that you've helped produce, you know, like, do you think we can work together? A lot of people I didn't even get responses from, which I think is okay. It's to be expected sometimes. I got like 2 no's as well. And then I ended up signing with someone who I thought understood the vision. And then I ended up working with a different agent by the end of it who was suggested to me by somebody. And I'm so glad that happened.
Same agency or different agency?
Different agency.
Okay.
Wow. That's what took the book like off because we were sitting on the proposal for almost like a year and a half with my first agent. And she just didn't understand the vision. She was like, we should do an Instant Pot vegan cookbook. It's going to sell. It's SEO. And I was like,
Instant
no.
what?
Instant Pot, you know, like
yeah.
I was like, no, I understand.
Yeah.
But I don't even really use an Instant Pot often. And I feel like I have no personal attachment to that book. Like I want to sell a book that's a story and culture and recipes and vegan, you know, like, can we make it happen? Basically it was no. So I took it somewhere else. She got the vision. And then we took it to auction, which I definitely recommend for any authors because I think it's a lot more lucrative that way. And it's the same thing. It's literally like speed dating. Well, I don't know. I've never done speed dating in real life, but like you have back-to-back meetings and the publishers tell you their vision for the book and what they can offer you. And then you find the best fit. Whereas, yeah.
agents for the most part are there to, especially on that side of things, whether it's a talent agent, let's say, right? A talent or publishing agent. Their job is to take something that's very big already and essentially make it even bigger, right? They're very transactional.
Got it.
But like for so many of the creators that we talk to, they're starting out. And it's their first book deal. It's very much a different proposition because it's actually about the development and growing something together, right?
Right.
So they might be thinking like, sure, you got to maximize the thing right now, but how does the thing right now also inform what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You know what I mean?
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you're thinking about books too, like, do you want to write a second and third book?
Exactly.
Does the publisher have that in mind for you? That's really important too.
Yeah. And what ends up happening is, yeah, you go to a big time agency because that's the shiny thing that you know or you hear, but then you end up getting shelved, or you get an idea where they're like, hey, big market here, let's jam those two things together and this is what you can do. And you're like, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
Right.
No, absolutely. And I think it goes back to like what will go viral versus what feels good and what your mission is. Like that's so hard to balance too. So yeah, it's tricky. I think working with the right people is so important though, because at the end of the day, it's like, especially with a book, you're going to work with these people for 2+ years. If you love the people you work with, the quality of the product is going to be better, I think.
100%.
Yeah.
It's gonna be dreadful
Absolutely.
if you sign with people that you don't really even want to spend a week with. You know what I mean?
Do you have a Substack or anything else that directly?
I have a newsletter.
Okay.
It's on Flowdesk, not Substack.
Okay.
But it's been nice because I funnel a lot from my matcha page. So I have different, I guess, flows in the newsletter. So one of them is matcha specific. The other one is just like from my blog, which is like recipes and, so it's captured on my website. And I found that to be like really powerful because I think now it's up to like 20,000 and it's like a big number. Imagine being able to be in 20,000 people's inbox. I'm like, oh my God, it's incredible.
Totally.
So
and the open rates and the conversions are going to be way higher than TikTok.
right. Because they're willingly signing up for it versus like,
Yeah, it's a very active versus a passive thing.
Totally.
Let's hold off a second. Let's get the food in. So tell us about how did you become a vegan?
So I went vegan when I was in college, and at the time it was just actually I went dairy free first because being Asian, it's like I knew it was messing up my stomach, and I was like, why do I feel like shit all the time? And it was always after I ate pizza, pasta, mac and cheese, and those are like some of my favorite foods. So I was like, this is not going to work. But of course, a dairy-free mac and cheese is basically a vegan mac and cheese. So I started experimenting a little bit with vegan as well. And then I felt immediately like so much lighter. I'm a big like tummy ache girl. But after I went vegan, I was like, oh, I feel really like just everything is working. I don't have a stomach ache. I'm not bloated. Like I felt great. And my energy levels were really high. And around the same time, I was getting sober. And that's the biggest difference I noticed. I feel like when the body is more, I don't want to say clean because I don't really like using that word, but like when you're like in good condition and you're healthy, you do drugs or you drink, like you feel it so much more and your tolerance is down because all of a sudden you're feeling good. So you notice the difference. Before that, like I didn't even realize what I was doing to my body. So it's kind of like all around the same time. And I think, I wouldn't say they go hand in hand, but like for me, it was like a combination of like a health journey and then also like this spiritual, not religious, but just like this spiritual journey of like being kinder to myself and having purpose in what I was doing. So for me, it was like going from being afraid of food and thinking of it like calories, numbers, fuel only, to then being like, oh, there's a purpose in every food choice I make for myself, for animals, for the environment. Like I feel good about eating. I had this like new interest in food again. So for me, it was like holistically very, very healing to go vegan.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've mentioned earlier that we could delve into it, but I mean, if you don't want to, it's all good. But
yeah.
You became sober. Was it alcohol? Was it drugs? Like,
yeah.
And how did you get to that point and kind of decided like, yo, I'm going to cut away from that?
It was a little bit of everything. So started with alcohol when I was really young. When I lived in Shanghai, it was kind of the norm.
Do you speak Chinese?
I do.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So you speak English?
English, Chinese, Korean very, very badly. Japanese a little worse than that. And then my French is better than my Korean and my Japanese.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
Shit, real polyglot over here. Nice. Okay.
Do you do any content in other languages?
I haven't.
Okay.
I should though. I've
should.
gotten requests and I was like, sometimes it's like, man, I don't know how to say broccoli in
Mandarin.
or Korean. I'm like, I have to like slip in a little bit of like Chinglish sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Broccoli.
I know. I was like, I don't know how to say
That's all you
broccoli.
gotta say. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So so you were living in Shanghai.
So I was
Or
living in Shanghai. Yeah, Shanghai, exactly. And it was kind of a normal thing to go clubbing at that time. I was 13. And yeah.
Wait, what?
So I guess I should preface it by
I
saying
started early at 16. Like what?
I thought I started early at 14.
okay,
You
but
have the-
13, 14 is not far off.
In Korea too, by the way.
I mean,
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
the international thing.
It was a
little bit.
discotheque. Remember the disco?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
my
but
house
that's
took
not
me to a
like-
discotheque.
okay, gotcha.
I went clubbing. I was drinking. at
No,
14.
that's what it
Yeah.
is. It's the older friends and
Yeah.
being in a foreign country, I think. And as an expat, you kind of I feel like you get away with a little bit more than you would if you were like local. So they never checked IDs. I didn't even know you needed a fake ID until I got to the US in college. And I was like, oh my God, you guys need a fake ID? Like, that's crazy. But you could walk into like a 7-Eleven and buy like this giant beer for probably like $2 US. And it's just, everything was so accessible. So we went out and it was kind of a crazy situation because sometimes the bouncer would be somebody from your school. And then the DJ would be like someone from another international school. So they would
So you were in the international community.
Yeah.
In Shanghai.
Exactly.
Got you.
So they were almost like doing that thing. I guess they do it in the US too, right? Like promoter tables. But it would be a setup where it's like a DJ and then a door person. And then you're just like trying to get everyone from the schools to come. And we're all like 13, 14,
Try
like
to get
smoking cigarettes.
Try to get as many girls in as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
you're wearing heels. Like it's like so crazy to think about now, but it was normal to me at the time. And I started early. It was like that first night I went out, I drank for the first time. And then I also had like this pill. I didn't know what it was, but it was ketamine. So I started like pretty hard, you know, and then going from there, everything felt less scary after that. Cause I was like, well, like weed is like so much more natural than whatever it is I took. So like, sure, I'll try it. And I think you don't realize that like you're going into it deeper and deeper. Like, I mean, I was a pretty good girl, I would say. Like I always got good grades and like took care of my stuff despite whatever was going on like at night. And I had always set these limitations for myself. Like, I'm never going to smoke something. I'm never going to like inject something. I'm never going to, you know, whatever. And I slowly would just like keep doing it. And like the bar would get higher and higher. Yeah. And then I think the craziest thing for me was realizing that it wasn't about socializing anymore. Like sometimes I would like use or drink when I was alone. And then I was like, oh, this is like a real problem, you know? So going to the US was helpful for me because A, the access was very much limited. Like you needed a fake ID. You can't just like walk in anywhere and get, you know, drugs, alcohol. And then also like having a roommate from the US, like realizing that, oh, these behaviors are actually very weird and abnormal because everyone around me is like starting to drink for the first time, getting excited. And I'm kind of like over it. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling old. I'm feeling tired. Like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So yeah, eventually like I got sober. I would go to AA meetings sometimes. But honestly, like I think going vegan at the same time was helpful for me because I really felt it when I would try to like sustain that behavior and that lifestyle. It just wasn't possible anymore. So that and like giving a shit about school, I think, you know, I really felt like it was this new opportunity and like a second chance, a new start. And I was like, I got to take this seriously. You know, I got to get a job. Like I can't be out here doing these things. So yeah.
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 Thank you for sharing. I mean, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, the international, I mean, it's also fascinating because, you know, when you think of China, like they're so anti-drugs, obviously, but
Right.
within the siloed international community, the affluent international community is
Right.
still readily available.
That's
I
an-
mean, it's the same case in Korea,
Korea,
and these other countries.
yeah.
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 Thailand, Vietnam. Yeah, it's all those international sort of
Yeah,
expat
yeah, yeah.
enclaves. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, Singapore is probably the one place where you're like, all right, you better.
Yeah, you better. Yeah.
Be a little more
you better
careful.
relax.
Yeah, yeah.
unless you get whipped with the cane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
But please eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for us?
I guess I'm curious how you guys are navigating like doing partnerships because I feel like a lot of your work is community focused and I wouldn't say my work is necessarily community focused, but it's similar in the sense that like, yeah.
Good.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, good. I'm
Yeah.
so glad.
It's really good.
You know, like I'm doing something with a purpose and a mission sometimes. So when someone appeals to me and is like, well, you got to do this for like the good of it, it's really hard to balance that. So how do you guys like, what's your mentality in terms of like accepting partnerships and sponsorships to like fund the good work, you know?
So I'll start by saying we haven't made money from anything that we've done. This is still like a labor of love and like it's a loss leader for us, right?
Yeah.
In that whatever partnerships or brand deals or whatever we're doing, it's all just to subsidize what we're already spending out of pocket. So number one. Having said that, there will be a time, And we are doing this because fundamentally we think that doing good is good business. And those two things can coexist and can be, you know what I mean? Like people know, right? Like if we were trying to do this and just get views and just do, you know, brand spot, I think people would be like, nah, forget that. But I think it's like, you know, whether we're giving like vouchers for people to go to the restaurant, no one's paying for that. Like we're paying for that. We're like, hey, well, how can we actually try to measure impact in a different way? Well, why don't we just pay people to literally go and take pictures of that restaurant?
Right.
You know, stuff like that. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but like A, we don't make money yet. And then B, fundamentally though, we do think that having, you know, doing good and growing a really big business is actually good for everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you know, it's one of those things where like the longer you can provide value and utility to your community, the longer you, the more you could delay that ask, the bigger
Right.
the ask can be.
I think you should also give her. Yeah, I think you should also give her context that we're not making money, but we're sustaining.
Yeah. Well, but again, I guess the biggest point is like we're actually not worried about today. We're worried about 10 years from now, right? And that definitely comes from a place of privilege. That comes from I've been in YouTube world for 15 years, right? 16 years. It's like, you know, when Jakey started, he still has, but like, you know, he had a retail business, he had a marketing agency, he had like, you know, all these other things. So I think, you know, it certainly comes from a place of privilege, but you know, I think the work that we do is the work that we do because we're able to not worry about trying to make money, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So I think for me personally is I'm able to pay rent. I'm able to eat what I want to eat. I mean, also it comes with the job. You know what I mean? I'm able to buy my mom and dad nice things occasionally. As a company, we haven't profited.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm able to sustain, I'm able to pay my bills, but we haven't profited. And because everything that we make has been going back into building this podcast, building Righteous
Right.
Eats. You know, if a brand gave us a bag, a certain sizable amount, a chunk of it always go back to the community. In
Right.
the sense, in ways of us buying out a restaurant so that members of our community could come and eat for free, or if a brand is like, yo, I mean, we put out this example a lot, like Samsung, their flagship store in the meatpacking district, initially hit us up like, yo, we got 10 bands. Can you do something with us? And it was like, oh, that's not even what we charge for our videos. You know what I mean?
Right.
For like, especially if we're gonna work with a global brand like y'all, like 10 bands, nah. But we thought like, you know what? We'll do it if you let us, you know, do an event at your space, and then we use that budget to pay street vendors where we invite members of our community to come and eat for free. And if y'all let us to say that budget out into the public with no NDAs attached, we'll do it. And they were like, I bet. And we'll also put you on like a billboard in Times Square
Love
for
it.
like a few days, you know what I mean? And we're like, I bet, you know? So
Yeah.
it was that compromise that we made because we felt like, okay, cool. Maybe we're not gonna get some sort of immediate profit right now, but we've invested back into our community. We've also created this moment and a relationship. Now, if we want to go back to Samsung, as long as our stakeholders continuously stay there, like if we want to throw an event, anytime, like
Love
they're
that.
like, yo, welcome anytime, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So again, it's because we look at it as a long-term relationship instead of, yo, this is gonna be a one-off.
Right.
Like, let me see let me try to milk as much as I can. And I think, again, that's fair if that's what you need to do. But I think personally, I think it's a bit short-sighted. You know what I mean?
I don't know if this is helpful, but this is like something that a mentor put me onto very early in my business career. The decision matrix for like what you do is usually a Venn diagram for us. It's brand, audience, or revenue. Those are the three circles that we look at things, right? I'll save you from the actual whiteboard session, which I love.
This guy loves doing that.
Yeah. But brand, audience, and revenue, right? So certain things we know that like by brand, what we mean is credibility, prestige. When you work with the Samsung, sure, they're not going to give you a ton of money, or they might not give you any money, but you're like, yo, mom, I got to work with Samsung, right?
Right.
Or to another partner, you're like, look, yeah, we've done stuff with Samsung, right? It's the logo for the website. basically, right? So certain things we look at for brand, other things we'll look at for revenue. So like you're like, yeah, I'm not that passionate about this thing, but the deal's very good.
Right.
Okay. And then other things, it's like, you know, it just gets you in front of new audience or a new community and people that can turn into your community, right? So obviously the perfect deal is something that hits all of those things, right? You get paid a ton of money, it gets seen by millions of people, and you do it with the brand that's really beloved, right?
Yeah.
Sure. But if it's not that, as long as you understand and have that sort of decision matrix or that tree, then you can go into things and say, okay, great. You know what? We're going to do this for the small brand. And I think you already do this intuitively. You're like, okay, you don't have you know what? I'll share you guys anyway. And you know what I'm saying, right? So,
yeah, totally. That's so funny. Samsung is the brand that I got the deal with when I quit my job.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah.
Full circle. Shit.
Yeah.
They didn't give me 68 bands.
Yeah.
Yo, what's up?
Yeah.
People don't understand what it costs to produce content. And I feel like that's something that I do struggle with that maybe you have insight into, because I feel like it's a YouTube specific problem for me a lot more. Like the cost to produce a really good long form YouTube video. And then if you don't edit it yourself, it's another cost. It's just like at a certain point, I feel like the return on investment is not there sometimes. Like, yeah, it's views, it's this, it's that. But like, I feel like sometimes my money's better suited going into like a 5-second reel, you know, which is like sad to say because I love to create. But that's, I feel like something that's come up a lot for me recently, especially because amongst my friend group, especially, it's like everyone would love to have an editor, but sometimes it's like, is the money worth it? You know?
Yeah. How much is a minute of content worth to you?
Oh, I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah. So for us, our sweet, the sweet spot and what we try to hit is $150 to $200 a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, movie studios and television like publishers, they
know.
literally think of SOWs in that kind of a way.
Right.
That's what I used to do, right? So I'm like, okay, great. You have, you know, we need 200 hours of programming. Okay,
Yeah.
well, how much are you willing to pay for 200 hours of programming?
I think that's why the book helped me kind of understand the value of content sometimes, because I'm like, holy crap, it seems like a crazy number. But then you realize like what really goes into producing a high quality product. And you're like, okay, yeah, it's expensive to create amazing things, you know?
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do with this, again, with this podcast. It's like, I think we get a lot of the 2 million followers on TikTok. Oh, I'm willing to do this for 250. And you're like, wait, you have to switch the conversation.
Yeah.
Like you're a publisher.
Exactly.
You're a creative agency. You do all these other things, right? You're a producer. You're doing all these things and none of it is framed that way because you're doing dances or something, or you might be, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like, no, they need to change this conversation because you're an entity in itself.
No, absolutely. I think it's interesting too. And I guess the reason why I asked the question to you guys was because I noticed that on your post with ABCV, there was like some pushback in terms of like, why are you promoting this bigger business? Or why are you working with this brand? Why are you accepting money? And I think it's interesting because with podcasts, I think it's a little bit more accepted. Like you're expecting to hear ad reads during the podcast. Same with TV. You watch TV, you know there's going to be ads. But when it comes to content, people still, I feel like, have this barrier to understanding that like it costs money to produce content. And so like all the stuff we're providing for free every day is only possible because we get paid, you know? I don't know. I feel like we're getting there though with people understanding. It's just, I think like you said, it's important to establish these things early on if you can as a creator, because sometimes people get so used to seeing something from you. They have these like expectations and this almost not a parasocial relationship, but I guess it's more like expectations, like what they expect from you. And then when that's challenged by something new, it's like so hurtful to them or like they're really upset by it. But the more you kind of sprinkle it in, I feel like the more they're understanding of it, that it's part of the brand too.
I mean, listen, we recently on this podcast, our friend Lydia, shout out to Lydia. I'm going to see her in a few hours. She ordered Sweet Greens and we were just talking about the franchise model. We weren't endorsing Sweet Greens. We weren't endorsing Chick-fil-A. We weren't endorsing
They're not a
McDonald's.
franchise, by the way.
Right. They're not a franchise. But McDonald's is a franchise.
Yeah, we were talking about how it's not a franchise, but McDonald's is.
And McDonald's is, and how Chick-fil-A is. And we were just talking about their business model.
Right.
And we put that together as a clip and we put it out there. And these people were like, yo, why are you promoting McDonald's? I was like, dog. Dog. And again, I think it was jarring for certain people because they were like, yo, why is Jay Key, this guy who's the front man for Righteous Eats, who's championing small mom and pop eateries, talking about McDonald's. Like that itself is sacrilegious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
Where we could openly talk about their business models, right? Like,
Yeah. I don't know if is this a foreign concept to you, but we believe that there's a purge going on with the best creators. Meaning, I think now more than ever, if you stand for nothing, if you try to stand for everything, then you stand for nothing. And I think that these communities that follow you and that are, you know, deeply ingrained in these relationships with you, they want you to actually like be you. So, you know, like the days of like everyone saying like, I'm cool with this, I'm cool with this, I'm cool with this. In actuality, it's like, no, I'm not cool with this. Or actually, we feel this way. I think that's what's happening right now. Is that something you think you agree with, or you see, or you disagree with?
Well, I think being vegan, yes, because when you're vegan, I think there's an automatic assumption that you think the same way as another vegan. And it goes as deep as like, oh, I'm not going to work with Oatly, even though they're vegan, because it's canola oil and it's bad for the environment. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I'm not going to eat Oreos because it's this bleached cane sugar and it's processed and it's palm oil and it's not good for the orangutans, like all these things. So it's like
it's
there's
not good for the orangutans.
No, for real though.
For real
no,
thing?
it's for real.
Wow.
And it's just like
shit.
there's layers to everything, but I think it's really hard to feel like you're letting someone down, but it's impossible not to, right? Unless you just don't share anything about how you feel and your beliefs. So I mean, yes and no. Like people will find out easily if you're for them, I guess. And you can't be for everyone. That's absolutely true. Like I think the same applies to just navigating life. Like if you say yes to everyone, you're saying no to yourself. So it's hard though when you're like a sensitive, emotional person to like put something out there that you know is going to get pushback. But at the end of the day, like it's better to know who you're for than who you aren't for. And those people will like really support you. You know, like for me, it's, oh my gosh, every meat eater or carnivore person out there is like so against the content that I'm putting out, even though like I'm not very pushy about the vegan thing.
What does that? Why does that bother these people?
Yeah, very much so.
Really?
So I put a reel out the other day that like went viral, and it's like I know something's going viral when I get meat emoji comments. That's how I know.
I know when something goes viral when they're like, "Yo, this dude doesn't talk like that."
Yeah, I saw that clip from your podcast.
When they're
And
like,
it's-
"Yo, that's a fake accent." I was like, "Oh shit, the video's working."
Right. It like
Yeah.
escapes your bubble. So now you're reaching other people, which is very scary because you're like, I'm not used to this pushback. But honestly, it's like a blessing. You just have to like be like, okay, this is great. I'm reaching new audiences. And then half the time you do get more of a following, right? Like you're reaching the right people, but you're also reaching the wrong people. So I think it's just part of what comes with being a creator, which is also why I think it's not for everybody, because mentally that takes a toll on you if you're not thick-skinned. But I think that goes back to having the boundary between like knowing that your content is an extension of you, but it's not who you are. And nobody knows who you really are, right? Mm-hmm. Like no one's ever going to fully know you no matter how much you share on the internet. So
that's a gem right there.
yeah. As long as you know yourself, you're good, right?
Can you share some of your wins and losses?
In terms of the book or just in general?
Just in terms of your career as a
Well,
content
maybe more
creator.
directed. What's your biggest challenge right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your biggest pain point?
I think my biggest challenge right now is mental health, I will say again. Like I'm great in terms of like I've been sober for almost a decade now. Like we're solid on that front.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice.
That's huge.
But I think I
So
never
you haven't
expected.
drank at all?
No.
Like, okay.
No, not at all.
Not even weed?
No.
Okay.
No. I actually never really enjoyed it too much because I'm a very anxious person. So
Okay.
for me, it just was like not a fun time. But I think it's giving myself a break and being okay with that and like doing less, and then also giving up the control to be able to trust other people with my work. Like to me, it feels so personal that it's hard for me to like entrust another person with that. But it's been time to do that, you know? And I think that's only going to make it better for me to be able to like do more things that I love about this job, meaning like spend more time with family, have the flexibility to like do things that I couldn't do when I had a corporate job. And also just make sure it stays sustainable for me, because sometimes it gets so crazy and like I chalk it up to it being about the book. But I think now that I'm basically at the end of that journey, I'm like, oh no, the stress is still there. It's not the book, you know? It's the way I'm doing things.
It's a journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I was asking you about. Like, because I think I don't know how much of the healing out, like the macro healing you talk about, but whether it's, giving space for yourself to just be, right?
Yeah.
I think that, if if like all the vegan documentaries started happening in like 2018, 2019, I think all of that mental health and like really just the awareness around all that, I think that's, I mean, I recently started going to therapy like maybe a year and a half ago, right? Like
awesome.
a year ago. So it's like, I think that that's another thing where like, there just needs to be much more education around that stuff. And I think that that's another opportunity. Cause I think, I don't know, do you talk about that stuff in your videos?
I try to a little bit, but I think what's difficult for people, or for me specifically, is that, you know, when you share, hey, I'm really struggling with this because my glamorous social media life is so hard and I feel like people have access to my life. It feels like shit to say that. But
I think you'd be surprised.
I think now people understand a little more than before. Because basically, I used to be a lot more forthcoming with like my personal life, mental health, all of that. Like I didn't really know who I was talking to when I put something out there in the beginning. So I was very much willing to share like everything. And then the further you go into the career and like the more you grow your community and like there are more people with their eyes on you, I think you realize like you're opening yourself up to not only the scrutiny, but also like people feeling the sense of entitlement to your personal life. And when you don't share, it becomes speculation of like, oh my God, what is she going through? Like, it looks like she cried today. And meanwhile, it's like, I just ate too much salt last night. You know, it's like, it's crazy. And if you're not able to tune it out, like that really takes a toll on you. So how do you navigate how much you're sharing? Because I really do think the more you share, the more people feel connected and the more you grow.
Totally.
But also like, then you really have to have like a good head on your shoulders.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think, by the way, we think about the reason why it's sharing, it's utility, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, can you provide maximum utility? And if you're providing maximum utility, you're not holding anything back, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, right?
No, absolutely.
Because like you said, you are you, but you're also you for them,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So you're like completely giving, right? And that's really, really hard, especially if you don't like hold anything back, right?
Yeah.
But you know, at the end of the day, people want to. I mean, you grow the most when you're dancing like no one's watching, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Or when you're like going through something really bad or really good.
Exactly.
You know, it's like a TV show, really.
Yeah.
Truman Show. Yeah. Do you know that movie?
No, I don't.
Okay. Yeah. It's a Jim Carrey movie called Truman Show.
Do you know that movie?
I'll watch
Sam?
it.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I mean, you've been so open.
The only question I have for you guys is about, you know, being both Korean. I feel like what's interesting to me is seeing like how trendy Korean stuff is, Korean food in general, like the whole Trader Joe's thing and just like Asian food being, I guess, more socially acceptable to share on social media. Whereas before, I feel like a lot of the food porn content was like pizza, mac and cheese, all of that.
I think that still is the biggest TAM in America.
You still think so?
Yeah, totally. But people are just a little bit more embracive and they're a little less scared, especially in coastal bubbles that we live in.
Yeah.
But I think in like mainstream America, like for instance, shout out to the Walmart crowd. You know what I mean? Because I'd never been to a Walmart until I was in my late 20s. Because growing up in New York, there's no Walmart. So Walmart crowd, for them, you know, japchae and bulgogi is probably still a very foreign concept. You know, but to your point, we're living in a very interesting time when the interest for all things Korean is at an all-time high.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have you been able to benefit from this moment?
I think in some ways, yeah, absolutely. Like I've been in situations where I know I'm kind of being hired for the diversity token or the token Asian, but I'm okay with it as long as I'm paid appropriately, you know? Because I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like you can champion this as long as I'm paid well. Like I'm not going to say no,
Yeah,
right?
say that, yeah.
But I guess when it comes to like the food thing, sometimes I think what's interesting is like you see these videos that blow up and it's like people not of the culture. And it's more interesting actually when someone not of the culture is making the food or like eating the food because it's different. It's not what you expect, right? Or maybe it's more familiar for someone. They connect more to that person. So I always think that's super interesting. And that's kind of how I feel about the matcha too. Like I do wonder, is it important to people to buy matcha from someone who's Japanese? Like I don't really know. To me it is, but we'll see, you know?
What was the so I feel like you were asking us about how it feels to be what was the question?
I guess
originally?
like what are your thoughts on it? Like, have you noticed a difference in interest in the content and not just Korean food, but like sharing a diversity of cuisines? Because I feel like you guys are really good about that. Like you really showcase a variety of food, not just like your average food. Or do you feel like there's ever a time where you feel like, oh, this might perform better if it was just like a really cheesy pizza? Like, have you ever felt that way?
We literally know that to be true.
That's
Okay.
a fact.
Yeah, we know that to be true. And we literally have launched, burger series. We literally call it pizza. We know that if we did a sandwich thing, it would do very well.
Right.
At the end of the day, we're very analytical about addressable markets, right? And you can do you could try to make a vegan sundae, right? That's you're talking about
That's not gonna work.
marginal, niche of niche. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Or you could do, a cheese pizza.
That's not gonna work, but we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I get you.
So we're very deliberate with that, and actually I think maybe this is the contrarian hip hop in us. I think it's we know that we could have grown way faster if we did all Korean content or
Right.
all Asian content.
Yeah, but we actually talked about this in 2021. He was like, "Yo, son, the fastest way for you to grow, you just got to be the Korean guy."
I
And
know.
I was like, "Fuck, that's the last thing I want to do." But I know I could run laps around all these Kyopo motherfuckers because I speak Korean. I'm from Queens. My family do cheza, dog, in America. There's no person that does this shit. So I was like, oh man, I could really do this well. But nah, I was just like, nah, I don't want to pigeonhole myself.
Feel
as that. And also realize that, and shout out to all my friends that have focused into one specific addressable market. I noticed in the long run, when that interest eventually subsides, they're categorized just for that, whereas they have no ways to diversify. That's why when you
right.
said that, I started off doing vegan recipes, but I made sure that I injected some lifestyle here, some thoughts here, CPG here, you diversified your portfolio and category. Of course, you could always go back to doing vegan recipes as your foundation, as the root, but you needed these other branches in order for you to take on other opportunities, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that makes total sense. And then you have have you ever seen that white guy that makes kimchi on TikTok?
Not yet.
And it's so fascinating. Maybe he'll pop up on your TikTok
Yeah.
next.
Now,
but
now that
Well,
we-
now that
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking about it, they're,
But
they're
it's-
listening right now.
I mean, it's amazing to see, but then it's like you said, he makes something Chinese and it's
So-
people are like, what are you doing?
So to your point, I think, being an Asian guy who's worked in hip hop media, who's participated in hip hop culture, there's always gonna be somebody try to pull your card. It's like, yo, you really down, or you really just doing this for the moment because it's trendy,
Right.
whatever. I think there's a clear distinction between appreciation and appropriation. Appropriation is, yo, I scanned through some, Remy's recipe and I'm just gonna replicate it and pronounce all this shit fucked up. You know what I mean? Not using the right fish sauce, and just kind of rock with it. And, I know it's gonna pop because people talk about Korean food right now. That's appropriation. Appreciation is, yo, I know the gochugaru to use for this kimchi. I know the cabbage to use. I know the emo at Hanarum that hooks it up for me whenever I pull up. Then I'm like, yo, you even more down than me. So how can I pull
absolutely.
your card? It's this dude who's a killer at Taekwondo, who's from one of the former Russian Soviet states, probably never been to Korea, but he's a better Taekwondo martial artist than us. This is like the Japanese guy who makes the best pasta in Tokyo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't pull their cards. You
Yeah.
know? So I think as long as your intention and you appreciate it and you showcase it and you're knowledgeable and you could pull out all the receipts, then I don't think anybody should be able to knock that.
Yeah, for sure.
And we also don't knock the people that do, right? I think that, even the stuff that we do,
Yeah.
we go in there with a lot of intention. We try to learn about the history, learn about the folks, learn about the dishes, learn about all that. We'll do a video, and then 3 weeks later, someone does the same video from the same person at the same restaurant.
Oh,
And it's
that's
literally-
wild.
Oh no, it happens.
Wow. Yeah.
It happens every week.
Down to the recipe.
Yeah, down to
the
Yeah.
joints that we ordered.
Yeah.
And I was like, dog, the menu is pretty extensive. You
Yeah.
could have ordered something else. But
Yeah.
But it literally is oh, we know that this will get views, and that we know that it'll get more views in that it's not coming from J Key.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, did we serve that restaurant? Do people really know? Do they know our intention?
Yeah.
Like, it's fine.
And yo, frankly speaking, a white guy taller than me, better looking than me, who's more friendly than me, might do a better job at presenting that restaurant to a
more
new
people.
audience. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's probably somebody in middle America be like, I fucking hate chinks. You know, like, it's like, I want to see this white guy doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and if
No,
it
absolutely.
does serve, you know, if it provides visibility to that restaurant, then yo, by all means.
Yeah, I think that's how I feel about the matcha too. It's like the brands exist and they're reaching a certain audience, and no matter how many matcha brands there are, or like how many brands in the same space there are, each one appeals to like a different audience, and there's a different intention behind that brand's mission. So I feel like it's all fair game. You know, at the end of the day, like the mission is really to get that matcha into more people's hands, like good matcha, and have them understand like what that is. But yeah, to your point, like I'm gonna go see this guy Zach at Kettle. He's white, but he's like way more Japanese than I am. Speaks better Japanese than I am. You know what I mean? He's legit. So
Yeah.
it's like that sometimes.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to add? I mean, can you can you tell us the name of this matcha brand yet?
Not yet, but I will send you guys some for
And
sure
we'll share it
when
when
it's
it-
ready.
yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
When is this slated to launch?
Great question.
Supposed to be this spring, but it's all kind of flexible because the cookbook is like priority right now.
Okay.
What's the title of the cookbook? You
It's
haven't
called
even
Sesame Soy Spice. It's out.
Sesame Soy Spice.
Yes, and then commas.
SSS.
And then it's out next Tuesday. So it's available for
shit.
pre-order now, but it's out next
Can you
week.
tell us the exact date, because this episode's not coming out next Tuesday?
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's the 26th, I want to say. March 26th? Is that
So
right?
by the time this podcast comes out,
Yeah.
the book has
So go get
already
it.
been on stands for probably a few weeks. So make sure you cop the book. What is it again?
Sesame Soy Spice.
Sesame Soy Spice. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful name. I love
Thank
sesame
you.
oil, sesame seeds.
Exactly.
I go OD with it.
Sesame's everything.
Yeah.
What other press junkets are you doing for that book?
So that's kind of why I'm here this trip. Next week is like a big back to back, but we're doing Pix 11. We're doing something with Essex Market, a Google demo. We're doing a dinner at Spicy Moon. Have you guys eaten there yet?
Yeah, not yet, but I know of it.
Yeah, really good food. And they're just like the kindest people. So we're doing a dinner there. And then we're doing something with a bakery in Brooklyn called 16 Mill. And I like to do a lot of like collaborative menu items to like bring people in, because these are places that I just love to go, you know. So it's like I want people to feel incentivized to like go there and experience the food. And that's it for New York, I think. In LA, we're doing a couple things too, but yeah, like I said, I'm like very sensitive and like introverted, so it's a lot for me to like be out there.
Really? I mean,
Yeah, I'm.
So when you hit me up, like, was it your assistant that hit me up?
Yeah.
No. I mean, like I can like talk to people, but I feel like after travel and like interacting with people, especially people who follow you and I think are expecting you as your version when you're like on,
Yeah.
it's very draining, you know, for me. So
Yeah.
I have to like kind of recover after that. I love it, but it's just like in my personality to be like, I need to like be alone for a minute.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.